In 2020, we had this global pandemic. Maybe you heard about it. One of the unexpected side effects of that, see what I did there, was a spike in medical narration like I have never seen before. It was a genre that very few seemed to be talking about prior, but all of a sudden it became one of the most popular genres overnight, and the whole world seemingly wanted a medical narration demo. But one person in particular has been there, done that for just a few years before any of us caught up with the trend. And she is my guest today to talk about it. Welcome to the show, the voice of the Statue of Liberty, Debbie Irwin.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to meet you.
You
virtually,
too.
But the first time after all these years of
Yes.
hearing about you. Yeah, and following you.
I have seen the Statue of Liberty from an airplane a few times. I knew from Ghostbusters 2 that the Statue of Liberty could walk, but I did not know that the Statue of Liberty could talk. So I'm curious, what does the Statue of Liberty have to say?
She recites her poem that's written at the bottom of her dress. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And it continues. So yeah, she recites her poem.
It's a pretty great credit to have. I mean,
yes. Some people are the voice of Donald Duck, and some people are the voice of, I don't know, Mafia 3 people and all the rest. But, okay, so the statue, I'm Lady Liberty is what some of my friends call me.
I am the voice of some obscure HR training program for some company that you have never heard of before. But you're the voice of the Statue of Liberty. So, well done on that.
You probably help more people.
If I understand this correctly, you worked as a stockbroker on Wall Street at one point in your career, which I think is pretty fascinating. So I want to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to know, do you think Tesla is really going to $2,000 a share like Kathy Woods keeps telling us on CNBC, or no?
Oh, I hope so.
Me too. My retirement does anyway.
Yeah, I traded the stock for a bit, because it was so,
Yep.
Right. And then I just stopped because I just got tired of, I don't like roller coasters. And I just got tired of, being in the market and doing all of that. So now I had a client when I was a broker. Her name was Mrs. Bernstein. She was probably 99 years old. She had a list of stocks that she had had for probably 98 years. And her gains in all of them were phenomenal. Yep. And how come she had those gains? Because she never sold anything.
Yep.
She just hung on to them through thick and thin. And, I want to be Mrs. Bernstein one day, 99 and holding lots of wonderful stocks.
Valuable stocks.
Lots of valuable stocks. Exactly.
If I look back through my portfolio at the stuff that I've just been holding for like 10 years versus those moments when I was like, oh, I'm going to trade this. I know I've got a hot tip. Yeah, I definitely performed so much better when I just bought and held and just kept myself out of it as much as possible.
I know the right things to do. It doesn't mean I always do them,
So it's an interesting transition though, from Wall Street to voiceover. What brought that on?
It wasn't direct. I went from Wall Street to Sesame Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, that works.
Had a baby and stayed home. 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids. I was really fortunate because I wanted to be full-time mom and got to be. And after many years of being just a mom.
I would never say that. I would never say just.
That's why I put it in quotes, right? Just a mom. After many years of working inside the home, right?
Yep.
And obviously being pretty active in a lot of other ways, affiliated with the schools. I ran a lunch and learn program in my kids' school for the high school students, which was a really interesting thing where I brought in parents from all different walks of life to help the high schoolers get an idea of the myriad jobs that are out there in the world,
Yep.
because a lot of times they've got no clue what they want to do, especially as they're,
Yep.
approaching college and whatnot. Sometimes they don't even know what their own parents do, more often than not. So yeah, so it was many years into that. I was, let's see, my oldest was probably 13, Josh was 13, Emmy was 11, Sarah was 8. And it took me a while to figure out what it was that I was going to do in the next chapter of my life.
Sure.
And, I have to give my mom a lot of credit, because she was the one who was like, what are you going to do when you go back? And I would get really defensive like a teenager, like, Mom, how could you be asking me this? I've got 3 kids, and albeit, luxury problem, 2 homes, I got the dog, I got the cat. I can't, but she planted a seed, and
Yep.
that seed grew, and the questions, started bubbling up, and I thought, well, am I going to go back to being a stockbroker? And I was like, oh God, no, do not want to do that. And I thought, well, I could be a broker to the brokers. That's, maybe a little bit easier. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's like, 9 to 5. No, I'm still like, I've got an 8-year-old. I'm still a full-time mom. That's the one thing that you've always and only loved, and that was theater. In fact, that's why I came to New
Okay.
York in the first place. And I thought, well, theater. I'm not available nights and weekends. That ain't gonna happen.
Right.
So, I was flipping through the NYU School of Continuing Education book back when, things like this were actually printed. It was this fat. And it was like being in a candy store and just sort of flipping through, and, oh, I could take a class in this, or I could take a class in that, or this or that, or this or that. And there was another flyer. It wasn't with NYU, but with a YMCA organization that's very active in New York City, huge programming. And they had a class in voiceover. And I really didn't know what voiceover was, but I was curious. And so I decided to take the class. And within the first 5 minutes, Mark, when I got up, and they hand you a script, and I started reading, I was like, okay, I found it. And, the irony is that, I didn't want to go back to Wall Street because I didn't want to build a book of business again. It was like, oh
Yep.
God, no. Well, the
Right.
irony is that's exactly what I've had to do, right?
Yep.
Especially at this, in the last 20 years, previously it was all in your agent's hand, right?
Yep. Yep.
But now, more than ever, it's incumbent on us to find the work, right? And that was certainly the way as a stockbroker. I mean, it was nice. I worked for Dean Witter and then Smith Barney. When you're working for a behemoth, you've got the infrastructure there. The desk is there for you. The marketing is
Yep.
there for you. But you've
Yep.
got to smile and dial, right? 100 dials, you would reach 10 people. Of those 10, one person said, you can send me the brochure. And then from there, you'd wait 3 days and follow up, and then you'd have to build a relationship. And, I had a successful career there. I built
So
that. So
who would have ever thought that training in Wall Street would one day have such relevance to voiceover as the industry shifted? Like you said, we shifted from that agent model
right.
to a model that requires voice actors to be more proactive on that side of things. And the fact that you had those years of making those calls and trying to close those deals, I'm sure that ended up being very advantageous for you ultimately.
It really, really was. It really was. I had no idea that would be so helpful to me. And also, when I first came to New York and struggled like every other young actress with the casting calls and and all the rejection that I endured, that helped build kind of a thick skin too. So
Yeah.
I say that, the wheels come full circle from where I started when I came to New York, although not on the same plane, because I've had all these other experiences. And, after theater, I worked at the Guggenheim Museum. So at a higher plane, and I'm back where I started in a sense, but I'm living the dream that I came to New York for. I just didn't know it was going to look like this. And
That's
so,
amazing.
you know,
So as near as I can tell from looking through your website, you've done all the things in voiceover. Your resume and your skill set is unbelievable. Languages, accents, characters, the client list, all of this stuff. It would appear to me that you've booked in pretty much every genre known to mankind.
no promo.
The
No promo.
the one thing,
No
okay,
promo.
no promo. So that one genre. But the one thing I'm curious about, talk about how important improv has been to your journey, because I think that that is an aspect that is not talked about as much, maybe unless you're in a room with Scott Parkin, but we talk a lot about the acting side of things. Very seldom do we talk about improv. So how has that been an influence?
I think that's a great question for a number of reasons. I mean, the bunch of things come to my mind. One is, we're interacting with people and in a session, and while we always need to be professional and know where the boundaries lie and when it's time to talk and when it's time not to talk, right? You also want to be facile on your feet and be engaging, So I think improv helps you to be relaxed in a novel situation, and when you're in a directed session, and with medical sessions, they're often directed, and there are often a lot of people in the room, right? You can have, maybe you're lucky enough to have an audio engineer, and then you've got the agency people, you've got their client, you've got the science writer, producer, etc. So a lot of folks in the room there. So improv helps you to feel comfortable, just in your own skin, knowing that I don't want to say you're the focus of attention, because you're not, but you're the one who's performing on demand.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing that came to mind is just, okay, 3 in a row, give me an ABC. I mean, if you can't take direction and do something differently, then you're a one-trick pony. Then you're a one and done. People take note of that right away, and they see that
Sure.
limitation, and they feel that limitation because they can only go so far with you. So improv really helps you to build and stretch your muscles. And in our work, we have a lot of muscles that we build and stretch. Our ears are muscles, and the longer we work at this, the more refined they become. And when I started out, I couldn't hear half the things that I could hear 2 years later, 3 years later.
Right.
Things I hear now I could never have heard in the beginning. And the same thing is true with how we, interpret a script, or how we approach it, or tools in our toolbox, right? And improv is, I think it's I'm glad you brought it up. I've been thinking about going back and doing it again, because a couple of my students are studying with Rebecca in Rome, Rebecca Hoff. I think that's how you say her name. And I had studied with her a long time ago. She does these online improv classes, or at least she runs them. I think she has some other people who are teaching them too. And they're fun. They're fun, and they're good exercise.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting, you said that it helps you to get comfortable in your own skin. Well, simultaneously, I'm guessing that it helps you to get out of your head. Because sometimes when we get in the booth in front of the microphone, or in front of, a group of people, if we're doing a live directed session, it's really easy to get buried inside of your head. I think about the times in the past when I've worked with Everett Oliver, and like, he's constantly telling me, Mark, you got to get out of your head. You got to get out of your head. And I'm guessing that that's probably an area where improv could help with getting you out of your head.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
If you can't have fun, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be able to have fun when you're in the booth. And that's definitely a way to have fun when you're in there in a session.
So I don't recommend this in a session. However, maybe prior to a session. And this is
Okay.
something that I've discovered in working with some of my students. And we did this in one of the workshops that I had. I sometimes run these intensive 4-week intensive medical workshops. And then I also tried this with one of my private students, and it was like key, door, ding, and it's playing music and having them dance. Right now in the group, I picked the music because, well, I love to dance, and so I had all these different, songs, and I had each person like, I said, I don't care. You can turn your camera off or leave it on. But they did a read for a script, and then I had them dance, and then they came back and they reread the script, and it was completely different. Right.
They're out of their head. They're totally relaxed.
And this private student of mine, so I raised it with him, and I said, music, are you into it? And he immediately said, yes, Stick Figures. I guess this is a band. It's sort of a reggae, rock, whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, you have your own music? Sure. So he put it on. He got up. He was jamming to it, and it was like, oh my God, we found something that really, really works for you. I'm like, dude, this is how you get real. This is what and it's so improv, dance,
It makes
whatever
sense.
it is that lets you be free, right?
Something that gets you loose before you go in there. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Do you like to dance?
So man, I can't, I won't, I wouldn't, I would probably break a hip or, break a lamp or something.
You refuse to, basically.
I do. Yes. I'm very stubborn and set in my ways in that regard. I love to listen to good music. I can definitely enjoy and appreciate that. But yeah, no, I would hurt somebody, either someone else or myself, if I attempted.
Okay. Well, then that's not the key to your door.
It is not the key, but every once in a while I will put on music or something like that before I go into a session, because it does, it can change my state, change my energy. And so it makes sense to me that can be the thing that can be the thing that works for you. So you've brought up medical narration a couple of times, and that was obviously one of the things that I really wanted to speak with you about. I think that medical narration as a term itself is very broad, but sometimes we have a very limited perception of what that actually includes. So let's start by breaking down the term medical narration and talk about some of the different types of work that can be found under that, very large umbrella.
Yeah. I consider it an umbrella under which there are subgenres. So you've got medical commercials, you've got medical corporate scripts, you've got medical anthem scripts, and those anthems can be commercials or they can be corporates. You've got medical explainers. You've got medical e-learning, or med ed, as we call it. You've got mechanism of action and mechanism of disease animations. You've got ISI, which is important safety information. You've got medical device. And then there's, VOG for medical conferences, for medical associations, for hospital annual benefits, and so on. And while there's obviously overlap, VOG is VOG, right? And, explainers have certain general qualities about them, commercials too, e-learning as well. So there's certain fundamentals that are true across, these various genres. However, beyond that, that's just sort of the general bird's eye view. Beyond that, then you want to get into more specifics of each of these to take a look at what's unique because they are medical. So in the case of commercials, you'll find that they tend to be, you're going to find more warm, caring, concerned, loving, maybe authoritative kinds of tones in that, whether it's
Sure.
for,
Yep.
come to our hospital, we're doing things newer and better, or are you worried about a loved one, come see our nursing home. We've got care like, it's as if you're at home, or, Medicaid and, Medicare, really confusing. We get it, right? So those kinds of tones and attitudes, you're not going to find, flippant or really, casual, or, a lot of what you hear on sort of mainstream. It's just not going to be
Sure.
that. It's a certain, you know, defined kind of commercial stuff that you'll see for medical, right?
I'd never really thought about it, but now that you've kind of laid it out that way, like, I mean, employee benefits, that's like the gift that keeps on giving. If you can get one of those clients and hold them long term, right? Like every year, you're going to have to come back and you're going to have to update that. And that is something that I've done before, but I never thought about it as medical narration.
Sure it is. Right. And you have to, when it comes to speaking to that demographic, there's a you when it comes to e-learning, all right, that you want to be conversational, and even the term conversational has spread into excuse me, the medical genre, right? It's there, right?
100%.
We
Yep.
need every everybody wants to be spoken to like a real human being, right? Um,
Yep.
but there are degrees, right? You don't want it to be really casual if it's a doctor, prescribing something to you and telling you, do not take this medicine on a full stomach because it could kill you. You want to hear that being told to you in a really clear, strong,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
with a sense of urgency kind of tone, right?
Sure.
So, but getting back to the e-learning content, you start out and you're warm and welcoming, right? And you want people to feel like, okay, I'm here with you, and we're gonna, this is what we're gonna learn about. And there are nuances in every sentence, right? Just to sort of how to lay it out so that it's interesting. And we're also going to talk about blah blah blah. Well, we're going to get to that later, right? So I don't have to like focus heavily on it now but I'm just kind of giving you a little peep show, we're going to get to that later kind of thing. Or, welcome back, welcome
Yep.
back. That means you already know them, and they already know you, right? And now they're, you had the morning session, now they've had lunch. And so you're already, comfortable with each other. So you can be a little bit more casual as you're starting back, just,
Great tip.
things like that. And then you get into, the structure of, all right, this is what we're going to review. And just to take it back a second, in terms of all the various subgenres that the way that I teach is, so first you're looking at what do we know just generally about each of these genres. And then we
Okay.
look at the structure of the scripts. We look at, okay, how are they put together? And is there alliteration? Is there repetition? Are there lists, especially in e-learning, right? How do we
Sure.
treat
Yep.
those lists? Are there 3 in a row? Is there 3+1? Are there echoes of ideas? Are there bookends where, like in an anthem script, for instance, where we'll start with one idea and then we end with sort of an echo of that idea down at the bottom, sort of acting as a bookend for, holding the whole story together.
Okay.
Things
Yep.
like that. And then the third way, so you deconstruct the script, right, to pull it apart, and you understand how the writer was putting everything together, and you look for unique words too, words that, as an example, there's a line in one of the scripts that I use, which is, we're on a mission to end unwellness. Now, unwellness is not a word you hear too often, right?
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
a unique word, and the writer wrote it for a reason. So instead of we're
Yep.
on a mission to end on wellness, well, whoa, not so fast, right?
Don't just gloss over it.
There's a reason for the writer having given you that, that word that is so unusual, right? So pay it some homage, pause.
Yeah.
I don't mean pause like literally pause, but for yourself as you're trying to understand the script, take note of it, kind of thing. And then the third layer is understanding the context and the subtext, right? And who you are and who you're talking to, because that changes your read, drastically. So I kind of went on a detour from talking about the different subgenres we were talking about.
That's okay. You're basically giving us a masterclass here. It's a genre that I don't do a lot of, although apparently I've done more than I thought of just listening to you explain
There
the
you
umbrella
go.
of it. Like I'm doing I do a Voice of God thing for a huge medical conference, and I've been doing it every year for probably 5 or 6 years. I'm doing a session for them again here in like a couple of weeks.
Well,
So I've
there
done
you
that.
go.
I've done some disclaimer stuff in the past though. And I got to tell you, when I do some of this disclaimer stuff, I sit in the booth and I scratch my head and I'm like, why would anybody ever take this medication? Like if they actually listen, some of these disclaimers are like, 5-6 minutes long of
That's called
just,
ISI.
here's all the ways you might
Yeah,
die.
not disclaimer. Don't
Okay.
call it disclaimer. It's fair balance, right? So we talk about all of the benefits, and by law, due to regulatory agencies, we have to talk about the risks, right? So I guess, you could call it disclaimer, but the technical term is ISI, or important safety information.
Okay.
Right? And yeah, that important safety information can go on for 8 minutes. And there are two audiences for that. Now, sometimes you'll have abbreviated versions of that in the pharma ads on TV, right? And then you'll also find that in the extended version, which will be on the pharma companies' websites. And they have two audiences for that. One is either the patient who's potentially taking the drug, and the other is for the HCP, the healthcare provider who is prescribing it. And so, unlike most scripts where you really want to understand who you're talking to and have a better idea, here it's really very binary. It's really rather simple. And there is a difference if you're talking to an HCP or if you're talking to a patient.
Sure. Yep.
However, the content is quite similar, because we're talking about the indications, we're talking about contraindications, we're talking about side effects, adverse events, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I had an audition that came in from an agent, and it was a medical thing. And there was one of these, 16 syllable words that I am not equipped. I am not equipped for. And I went into the booth and I attempted it because it's an agent audition, right? And after about the 20th take, I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I had like 3 different windows open up with different pronunciation guides from Google, and I'm listening to them in my headphones while I'm trying to, read the word or whatever. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I am just not getting this. This is crazy. How do we break these words down? Give us some pro tips, because honestly, that's probably for me one of the number one reasons why I avoid some of this stuff, because it's just the frustration of I don't know if there's a right way or a certain way, and then of course, you Google a pronunciation. Is it the correct pronunciation? Can you actually trust everything that's on the internet?
Right. Well, you're raising really good questions. And I don't after so many years of doing this, certainly there are many words that
some of them are just
that I know
there.
because I've, they're old friends at this point. And I wish I had taken Latin at some point in my past, but I never did. So I use Webster's Medical Dictionary. I'm on that site practically every day. And I also use the Cambridge Dictionary, which has both English and British pronunciations of words. I have a couple of other resources that I'll share with you, but and beyond that, you do have to be careful using Google, right? Because and I don't
Yep.
know who this guy is. The Frenchman who seems to be able to pronounce, it doesn't matter what the word is. He seems to have the corner on the market. This is how you pronounce
Yes.
blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't know who he is or where he came from, but he seems to be, you know, everywhere. I don't trust him. Okay. I mean, I'm sure he's a nice guy and everything, but he's not your guy. Right?
He's not the guy for the
No.
pronunciations. Debbie, I'm thinking there might be a side income for your business here. If you create the YouTube channel that has all of these pronunciations and you just created those videos and put them up on YouTube with all of those pronunciations, you could probably make money off of Google Ads just by letting that roll in the background for
Well,
eternity.
I'm actually working on something.
Oh, there you
Yeah,
go.
I don't know that it's gonna
Of course.
make me a penny,
Wouldn't
but
be a VOpreneur podcast if there wasn't an idea or a business opportunity in there
as I
somewhere.
see it, I don't think I'm gonna be making any money from it. But however, I am working on something that's gonna launch soon. It's gonna be Instagram and the medical word of the day, which will be
Yep.
fun. But I did want to just continue to address this because I think it's important. Sometimes you're fortunate and your client or agent will send you a hyperlink to how
Yep.
it's supposed to be pronounced. If you have a question, your first responsibility, in my opinion, is not to ask them how, but to do your own research. And you want to triangulate that research, right? Because when you do check multiple sources, you're likely to find different bits of information. Your safest source is going to a company website, right? Finding something that's branded by the company itself, finding, you know, how somebody from the company says it, right? And then
Yep.
other scientists from, they're at conferences. The thing you need to be careful of there is what's their native tongue, because if they're of non-American descent, the way they pronounce something isn't necessarily the way we would, So that's important too. And then I'll call a company and I'll say, "Hi, I'm working on a project for blah, blah, blah for your company. Can you tell me how you pronounce your drug name XYZ?" So, it's important to get that information right, and then it's a matter of just practicing it, and breaking it down into little pieces. So even if you're reading a script and you kind of stumble somewhere along the script, even if it's not a tricky word, the fact that you've stumbled is a sign, and it's a sign to heed, right? And it's your brain saying, there's a little tiny knot like in a chain, right? And I need you to kind of untie it. Our first, second, and third
Yep.
instinct is not to do that. We're going to go back and we're going to get through it. We're going to try again. Even again, I want to stress,
Right.
even if it's not a complicated word, but in the same way that
Sure.
thirst is a signal that our body needs water, when we trip over something kind of repeatedly, that's a sign to stop and pay that little section there a little love, and take the word before it, break down the word itself, add it to a little bit before, just again, kind of deconstruct and then put it back together and then take a few words and say it, blah, blah, blah. And then you try the whole sentence and it's like it flows. It's like you untangled that little knot and your brain's like, "Thank you."
That's valid. I never even thought about doing that before, because you're right. I'm generally the guy that goes back and just
We all
bulldozes through
do.
it, right? You take two, take three, whatever. And digital editing makes that even easier, right? You go back, give it another shot. If it takes you 5 tries, who cares? You just go back and cut it out in Adobe
Right.
Audition or whatever, and away you go. But to actually sit down and figure out, okay, why is this tripping me up, and kind of taking a minute to look at it again, it's a really good strategy. So I'm a firm believer that when we have a background or an experience or an expertise in a certain area, that it will lend itself to voiceover in that it helps us to
Mhm.
connect with a script in a different way. So as a marketing guy, when I'm working with voice actors who have background in medicine, whether they're a doctor, a nurse, they've worked in pharma in the past or something like that, I always encourage them that, you know what, I think medical narration is probably something that you should consider and at least explore. Agree or disagree?
So many people come to me to study medical narration who have a background in some form
Yep.
of the medical field. I've had pharmacists, anesthesiologists, science writers, doctors, RNs,
Mm-hmm.
across the board. And yes, there is an advantage. It's not the entire advantage that people assume, because
Right.
they know that sliver of the medical profession that they were in. And the medical
Yep.
profession is gigantic. So they don't know it
Yep.
all. They just know theirs, right? And just because they know that, which is helpful, doesn't mean that they're a good actor, doesn't mean that they are going to know how to interpret a script, doesn't mean that they're going to be a successful business person or any of those other things, right? So, however, what I do tell them is that the fact that you have that background is an ace card in another way. And that is that when you're ready to market yourself, you've got an entree that nobody else does. So the anesthesiologist can go knocking on the door of the American Anesthesiologist Association or the
Mm-hmm.
groups on LinkedIn for anesthesiologists, and he can get in legitimately, and he can,
Yep.
be
Yep.
there and have conversations as an anesthesiologist. And then sidebar, oh, and you're a voice actor. How interesting, right? We all know that people find what we do as voice actors fascinating. But if we don't lead with
Of course.
that,
Yep.
then 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 it's almost easier for us to be authentic, because we're being authentic because we have other things in common with these people. And
Yep.
those folks
Yeah.
can connect with us because it's a genuine connection. They're not going to connect with us because we're voice actors. They just think that's cool, right? So whether it's your alma mater or what have you. So that's the real advantage, I think, to people who have that background, because I can't knock on the door of the Anesthesiologists Association or the Nurses Association. These are massive organizations. And then once you're in there
Yep.
and you start to develop relationships with people, then you network and you find your way to, where's the PR department or the marketing department of your organization? And, do you know anyone, or who would I contact, for blah, 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 blah. But that's not how you're leading. You're not going in saying, hi, I'm a voice actor, blah, 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 but rather, oh yeah, we share this common experience. We went to this school
Yeah.
together. We shared this profession or what have you,
So then let's add a part B to the question. If having that background can be an
Mm-hmm.
asset, but obviously not the whole piece of the puzzle, is there a skill set that makes for an ideal medical narrator? Like certain voices lend itself maybe to promo or trailer over other voices, or people that have all of those characters inside of their head might lend themselves more so to gaming or animation than somebody else. Is there something that a voice actor, a skill set that they might possess that you would say, I think you're a good fit for this. I think this is a genre you should explore.
Yeah. So you need to sound intelligent and be intelligent, because
I'm out.
oh, stop. Stop. Because sometimes the scripts the scripts are complicated, and I'm not even talking about the tongue twisting terminology. Put that aside. Sometimes the
Yeah.
sentences are 5 lines long, and you have to figure out what the heck you're saying. And again, I'm not even talking about understanding the science behind it. You're not required.
Somewhere in there you have to find room to
Well, yeah,
breathe.
that too. That too. But
Yep.
understanding, like, w- with all what's qualifying what here? What's
Yeah.
How do I chunk this sentence? What's happening here? What's the subtext? One of my favorite terms in that appears quite often in medical is the phrase that there's a downward signaling cascade. A downward signaling cascade. And it reminds me a little bit of the skiing metaphor of it's all downhill from here. Now, is that a good thing, or it's all downhill from here, or a bad thing?
That does
I
not
don't
sound
know.
like a good thing. It does not sound like a
Well, a
good thing.
downward signaling cascade, it turns out it could be either. It just depends on the context. So if you don't understand the context,
Makes
then you
sense.
could be like, oh, and it's a downward signaling cascade causing blah, 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 when in fact it's actually causing a cure, So if you don't understand that,
Right.
and you're like,
Right.
causing
So
the
true.
cancer cells to, blah, 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 and and you got it all wrong, So, and you're not, we're not on our own doing these things, right? We're part of a team. We can ask for help. I like to have a creative call with my clients. I like to have them, explain things to me and what's new, what's novel, what's important here. If I can't figure it out for myself.
Let's talk about that, because I think a lot of voice actors are nervous about doing something like that because they think there's an expectation that they should just be able to take whatever script they're given, and it could be medical narration or anything for that matter, go into the booth and record. What would you say to somebody who's, if you're looking at the script and you genuinely aren't sure what your point of view is, or what the context of this is, calling the client and saying, can we have a 15-minute discussion about this or whatever? I think a lot of people think it's going to make them look unprofessional, whereas to me, I feel like it makes you look more professional. I would rather take 15 minutes of their time now and go into the booth, record it all wrong, send it to them
Of
wrong, and then
course.
have to go back and do it all over
I
again.
agree
So what do you think
completely.
about that?
It's a creative call. We're on the same team. We have the same goal, right? They want you to do the best that you can. And I ask for as many resources as possible. Do you have a rough cut of the video? No. Okay. Do you have the animatic? No. Okay. Do you have a storyboard? Do you have any music that you're thinking of using, even if it's draft? The more
Right.
input I get, the more I understand what the mission is. Like many years ago, I did a project for a client, and I sent back the audio, and then he wrote to me and he was like, oh, no, you got it all wrong. I'm like, okay. He said, yeah, the tempo. And then he sent me the music, and the music was something like, umps, 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 umps. I'm just, I'm kidding. It wasn't really,
Yep.
it wasn't
Right.
that, but my read was so languid and slow. And when in fact it was a very sciencey kind of, more techie kind of thing. And it was like, duh, well, I would have known that from the beginning. So now I know to ask for as much as I can get, because that helps me do my job better, so that I'm fitting into, I'm plugging in. I'm just a piece. I'm not the main focus at all. I'm there to support the project.
It really just makes you look more professional, not less. And I think that's what we need to walk away with from that, is just that understanding that having that willingness to make that call, have that meeting, that's actually a good thing. Nobody's going to judge you in a negative light for doing something like that. So the next question then is, we've got a sense of how to do some of this stuff. Let's talk a little bit about demos, because I did not think about how many different branches on the tree there were for medical narration. So what do you take into consideration when you're putting a demo together? Are you doing one medical narration demo that has a few of these different branches represented in it? Or are you doing, this is my medical e-learning, this is my medical corporate, this is my medical this, that, whatever,
No.
and are breaking it down into multiple?
I mean, myself personally, I have a page on my website for each of these.
Yes, you dominate all SEO when it comes to anything medical in voiceover. That and I've been through your website. I'm like, oh my gosh, she is the queen.
But no, that's not necessary. You want a demo that has range. You want it to be interesting, right? You want it to catch you like a normal demo. And in my humble opinion, you want it to leave you satisfied at the end. That's just my own personal opinion. I just makes me happy when something concludes, right? When it has a button as opposed to it just kind of is over. One
Right.
error that I hear often is that there's music throughout. And, like there's music underneath e-learning. No, there isn't music under e-learning. That's just not right. It's wrong, right? It's as if the accent is on the wrong syllable, right? The demo is not about making something pretty. It's about showcasing your voice, accurately portraying the different kinds of work in medical, right? Let's see, is he a client? I don't know if he's a client. I don't think he's booked me yet, but we know each other, and someday, right? He he presented me to a client as an option and asked me if I had a sample of one of my clips, but without music. And I don't even remember if it was on my demo or just whatever it was. It was real. So it really, it was legitimate. It wasn't like it was something that I had made and threw music under. But he wanted that sound, that my narration on that piece was what he wanted to show to his client, but he didn't want the music under it, right? So that the client could just hear my voice.
Yep. Right.
So,
makes sense.
I mean, I'm an advocate of people having lots of different samples to dole out as is appropriate, given what the project is that somebody's talking to you about, so that you can say, yeah, well, here's something that's in that area. Here's something that's akin to that. And I would put, I'm one demo I did for actually the anesthesiologist guy. We ended with a VOG piece with him, thank you and good night, to all of you at the, Anesthesiologist Association annual gala, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
So you want some conversational, you want some real person, don't put anybody else's voice on there. If you're the doctor or the patient, just don't, there's just not.
Right. That's valid. Get into character stuff in e-learning or something like that. And that's, yes, there's a use case for that in actual projects, but on your demo, don't create the confusion on your demos.
And then you also have to have some of that complicated text, complicated terminology, so that they know that, yes, you can deliver that. And
you've got the ability. Right on. That makes sense. Who are we contacting for the work then? I know that's probably a very broad question. Again, coming back to so many branches on the tree, but are we looking at hospital groups? Are we looking at pharmaceutical companies? Or are we looking at just other production companies that specialize in this? Like, what we got this new demo now that we've got produced, hopefully produced by you. Where are we taking it?
So it's tough to go directly to a pharmaceutical company. They're behemoths. They're really big, and they're not gonna, you can knock, but they're not gonna open the door for little old me. They deal with, and if they don't even, some of them have their own mega healthcare marketing agencies, right? In-house, or that they have bought. And then they will hire agents. And then those agents either go directly to talent, or else they'll hire casting directors, and so on and so forth. I did a webinar a month or two ago which is still available for sale, actually, the How to Get Started in Medical Narration. And what I did was to create a hierarchy of the players, of the people who are buyers of medical, and all of the channels that they can go through to get to you. And sometimes it's direct from
Okay.
the end user to you, but other times it goes, as I was mentioning, from the pharma company to a healthcare communications company to, to a talent agent to a casting director, or spinning off to a
Right.
P2P or
Right.
to a production house. So there isn't really a simple answer to it. Yes, you can, if you're self-marketing, you can contact some of the hospitals and hospital groups, academic centers, because oftentimes they will have their own in-house media company. So you can knock on those doors and try and develop a relationship there.
Sure.
Production houses, always. And the other thing I'll mention
Right.
in auditions that I've seen that have come down the pike from production houses or even on the P2Ps for this kind of work, in particular the ISI, what you're calling the disclaimer work, and the more complicated
Right.
medical work, the MOA and MOD, they will say, if you don't do this work on a regular basis, please don't apply.
Yeah. Don't let us be your first lesson or your
Yeah.
practice, or
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this course.
Well, this is a webinar that I taught that really gives you an overview. It has nothing to do with performance, because I do a lot of that separately, where I really go into, script analysis
Okay.
and different approaches to scripts and etc. This is really sort of an overview of where all that work is. So you're a perfect example. You said, "Oh, I had no idea that these things that I'm doing are actually medical narration." And when I go through the litany of, yeah, think of, think of when you're in the doctor's office and you see a video, think of, I did a project for Johns Hopkins University. It was a pitch that they had put together because they were trying to get a grant for $50 million. So they spent a little money, right? They spent a little money,
Spend a
not
little
much
money.
money
Yeah.
on me, but they spent a little money putting together a video showing what it was that this research project was going to do. And they won it, but there it was, right? So who knew, right? And then
Yep.
some of these companies, medical device companies, are putting together pitches for folks who are at the Olympics, and there are just so many different applications that you don't even think about or realize. I did explainer videos for Memorial
Yeah.
Sloan Kettering
Yep.
for people who are coming in who don't know the first thing about health benefits and what a copay is, things like that. So aftercare videos and,
Yep. So you're walking us through that big, from the airplane looking down
right.
at the genre. This is, these are the things that you need to know and that you need to understand. So if somebody is interested in that, is it on your website? How do we find out about your coaching and some of this teaching that you're doing in this genre?
Yeah, come to my website and click on the when you come to contact, and there are two options for coaching or for me as a voice talent, and just fill out the coaching form and tell me about you, because I want to know as much as I can about who you are and what your background is, and then you can set up a complimentary call with me for 20 minutes, and we'll talk
Nice.
about whatever it is that you want to talk about, and if there's some way that I can help, and if you're interested in in the webinar, we can set you up with that. I am working on a course. It's not ready yet, however. And I also have FAQs, and I have a fun video testimonial from some of my students and I like to call them medical students. And by the way, I don't only coach in medical. I do have students who are not interested in medical, and so I work with
Right.
them as well.
Obviously, the genre went through a really big boom in the pandemic. Last question. So we went through that big boom. Is it still a lucrative genre? Has it slowed down, or has the work shifted in other ways? What are your thoughts overall on medical narration and where we stand in 2024?
I would say that it was lucrative before. It continues to be, and I don't know that the amount of work really exploded as much as people's awareness of it exploded. Right.
Valid.
Yes, certainly there was an awful lot
Yep.
more content that had to do with cleanliness and safety and et cetera, et cetera. But, you know,
Sure.
the simplest Google search will show you how many billions of dollars are spent annually in this country alone on healthcare advertising.
Yep.
Right? And this pre-pandemic, right? It isn't like just all of a sudden the pandemic and so now suddenly, right? So it's been here.
Right.
It's been here, and it is growing.
It's been there.
It is growing because more and more and more and more, we need help understanding things. And, it's not, people are finding new ways or better ways of communicating, and we're a part of that, as long as, the computers don't do it for us.
As long as they let us. I'm thinking that if I'm listening to some of this medical stuff, I want to hear it from a human. I do not want to hear this stuff from a robot. Now, of course, that's, my take, and I'm not the one controlling the checkbook for some of these major corporations or whatnot, but I feel like my comfort level, if I'm a patient and I'm listening to this stuff or whatever, I would so much rather have it coming to me from a human. Well, Debbie, this has been fantastic, and I'm really grateful to you for coming on and sharing all this information with us. I feel like you kind of just gave us a little mini masterclass here in this episode, but
Thank you.
we'll absolutely link up to your website so people can reach out if they're interested in coaching. Keep an eye out for that course. We'll throw some links up for some of those references that you gave us for, was it Webster's Medical Dictionary and the Cambridge Dictionary? Because those are really valuable tools for anybody that's in this genre as well. And so we'll get that stuff in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send you some more too. Yeah, thank you very much, Marc. This was a pleasure.